Well, welcome back. We're going to look at once again the controversy around the Aarogya Setu app, which the government of India has now made compulsory for people working in the private sector as well as in the government from tomorrow. So all of us who are going to offices or coming to our offices will have to download this app. It's a way to basically trace and track down people who may have come into contact or who may have contracted COVID-19, and therefore effectively the government is able to then quarantine and isolate them. And it's proved to be successful in other countries like France, in South Korea in particular. That's the biggest example, but lots of controversy here in India over whether it would actually end up leading to something else, which is the government spying on its own citizens. Lalitesh Katragada is a co-founder of Google India and advisor to the government on this app. Lalitesh, welcome back. Just to ask you to address these concerns that are being raised by not just opposition leaders, but also a number of leading lawyers and activists that this is going to lead to a breach of our private data and allow the government basically to conduct mass surveillance.
Yeah, so I think that is a concern that's been expressed, Nidhi, and the response to that is actually quite simple. What is being lost in a lot of these conversations is that if you take the numbers we have right now, we have 86.9 million people, 8.7 crore people who have downloaded this app, right? And of them, we have pulled less than 5,000 people's data to the cloud and analyzed it for risks they might be posing to others, and 45,000 people have been alerted. So it is not as if, the data of all 86.9 million people has been taken to the back end and GPS and Bluetooth data has been analyzed. The whole controversy is around these 5,000 people, and I'm not diminishing the importance of these 5,000 people, but I think I want to put that in perspective.
Can I ask you, I mean, just very simply that when, let's say, somebody downloads this app into their phone and you have access to their data, what does that mean? I mean, does that mean you have access to their photographs, to their messages? What is the potential here for what you actually have access to through this app?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So I think when you download this app, you will know what is going to be done with your data. We are only capturing your the app on the phone itself is capturing your Bluetooth trace data, which is turning on your Bluetooth and tracing who all you come in contact with and keeping it on the phone. And it's also looking at your GPS location. Once every half an hour, it wakes up, records your GPS location, goes back to sleep, and also keeps it on the phone. And of course, when you do a self-assessment, where if you have symptoms and you want to report that of course immediately goes to the government, but that is only when you voluntarily do it. The two pieces of data I mentioned, Bluetooth and GPS, is all that is being recorded. And for 86.9 million people, it's being recorded on the phone. Only 5,000 people's data, when they are marked as COVID positive by ICMR, we are pulling them to the database.
No, so you're saying that apart from somebody's location, there is nothing else that can be accessed, right?
Location and Bluetooth, yes, correct.
Yeah, okay. Now, the question though, Sushmita Dev, she's a national spokesperson of the Congress, she also joins us. Sushmita, the point is, I think people are uncomfortable with the idea of the government also knowing where you've been all day. But other countries are doing it too. South Korea has a similar app. Other countries have a similar app. What is the principal objection, Sushmita, that your party is raising to this?
See, you yourself, Nidhi, have taken the example of Korea. Now, as far as my research goes, Korea is only using gender and age category. There are no names, there are no addresses. And see, let me tell you something. The Disaster Management Act is in play, but if you're going to make something like this mandatory, you have to regulate it. How does an ordinary citizen know that what is the protection it has against after sharing this data? So there could have easily been a law. That's what all experts are saying. People who are worried about privacy laws are saying. And you see, the most important thing is the purpose limitation. So you should categorically state that we will not use it for any other purpose. And what is even more scarier, Nidhi, the person who just spoke before me admits that this will go to a cloud. Now, what happened to Aadhaar? You see, I mean, we have no issue with using technology to fight COVID. In principle, we have no problem with that. But the question is, put the proper mechanisms in place. That's all we are saying. And I think Korea and Singapore have shown you the way. It's not like, you have to be a rocket scientist to do it.
Singh is an advocate with the Supreme Court. He joins us as well. And Avi, I just wanted to ask you legally, can this be made mandatory? Because there are lots of privacy issues, but India is sort of very wishy-washy on privacy issues in general, even legally. But how does this square off? I mean, I see legal experts saying, yes, this may be challenged in court, tab dekhi jayegi what happens in court. But how does this square off with whatever shred of privacy we have left?
Well, I think we have to start with that we are using the Disaster Management Act in ways that even, the Congress, which actually brought it in, never envisioned. When they said it'll be collaborative federalism and you'll roll it up from state plans and implement a national collaborative coordinated plan. So we're in a stage where Disaster Management Act is being used as a more draconian measure than even the Epidemic Act, which was draconian in its time, which was never envisioned. And it puts not only the authority, which is the National Disaster Management Authority, but also employers having liabilities for implementation of this. Now, of course, this is going to be tested, but the question is, how far does a state of emergency brought in by the Disaster Management Act extend, and what can be brought in? And this hasn't been done in a transparent, accountable fashion. What is the remedy if somebody misuses this data? What is the accountability for it being used, and precisely what is it being used for? Now, we've already seen violations when the so-called, notorious now Marcus incidents were happening. There was mass data dumping from cell phones without any judicial oversight or appropriate orders under the Telegraph Act, or where people's mobile phones had been. I even got to know one incident where somebody on the bus with somebody who tested COVID positive was given a call. Whatever the efficacy of these measures, they're not being done with a proper legal regulatory mechanism in place, which leads one to, of course, have serious concerns about breach of privacy and other concerns also.
Right. Well, I want to ask Vivek Reddy of the BJP about that Mr. Reddy, I think people, as Sushmita Dev rightly said, don't have a problem with using technology if that is what is needed to help us in the fight against COVID. But as Avi Singh pointed out, we need to know what safeguards are there. We need the government to state clearly that there's an expiry date to this. I mean, this can't be something that we use indefinitely either.
I think it would have been good if both Sushmita and Avi had read the privacy policy in the Aarogya Setu app, Nidhi. The app clearly says, first of all, that information that is given will not be used for any purpose other than COVID-19. So it's very clear. It's very emphatic. It can't be stated in more plainer terms. And the app also says that this information is being used for managing COVID-19 in the country. And it is voluntary. It is not mandatory, as Sushmita says, or as we believe. It is not mandatory. It says, the app also says in its privacy policy, that if you turn off your GPS or if you turn off your Bluetooth, you simply cannot use the app anymore. It cannot access any of the details. So this is how the app is molded. It is based on a purely voluntary effort. And the fact that millions of people in India are preferring this app is because it gives them a sense of precaution. It gives them a sense of awareness that, look here, this is where the COVID patients are. You may be heading into clusters. So it's better that you avoid. If you look at the vast benefits that are there, and it will help people to avoid COVID-19, and you have 70 million users, 80 million users.
How do I know you're not misusing this app to spy on me or anybody else?
No, it is stated. The app says so. The policy, the terms of privacy policy stated very clearly that the government of India says, it is not we saying, the government of India says that it will not be used for any purpose other than COVID-19.
And moreover, is it enough, Avi Singh, for the government to say we will not do it?
What?
If I could just say that every time the government said, any government said, trust us, then us lawyers should always just go home and forget our profession. No, a contractual license policy does not give way to a regulation where there must be transparency, there must be accountability, and if there is misuse, there must be some remedies for it. And of course, all of this requires judicial oversight, Because as we've seen in the past, and even today, surveillance has been misused. Courts have recorded it time and again, and giving more powers of surveillance without a regulatory framework can only encourage misuse.
I think this is very overbroad and very vague, Nidhi. When you have a clear set out policy in the privacy terms, and it clearly says it will not be used for any other purpose, and the government of India says it, you can have it accountable. You can make the government of India accountable.
How exactly?
What more is there? What more is there?
Well, I wish it was that easy to do that. Nikhil Pava is with us as well. He's, of course, the founder of Media Nama and somebody who's tracking these issues of privacy, surveillance, Aadhaar and so much more so closely for years. Nikhil, Vivek Reddy says, don't worry, the government is saying we're not going to spy on you. This is not a mass surveillance tool. And therefore, we should all breathe easy about the Arogya Setu app. What do you say?
Well, Nidhi, first up, any app that tracks your location all the time, or at least in this case, once every 30 minutes, and also tracks who you've been in contact with, is a surveillance tool. This is a disease surveillance tool. So let's set that aside that this is a surveillance tool. In addition to that, there's a scope creep taking place with Arogya Setu with other services being added. For example, there's an e-pass functionality which is on its way. There is a UPI payments for the PM Cares Fund, which is already there. And the Niti Aayog folks told us that there's also going to be telemedicine and other services that will be added. Now, there is no privacy policy for data outside of the contact tracing data that is available to us. And we don't know whether that data is going to be linked to this contact tracing data. Secondly, there is no sunset clause set up for this device, for this service. Prakash Javadekar went and said that this could continue for 1 to 2 years, this particular app. There's a vast amount of data collection that's going on, which is supposedly anonymized, but they're using a static ID, which can then be linked back to an individual in the future. So I think there are lots of gaps in the privacy policy. There are gaps in the design as well.
Nikhil,
and I'm not talking about the effectiveness of this app because that is highly questionable. Because Bluetooth is not going to be accurate. It is not, if let's say there are two people on different floors of a building, they're going to be shown as being in contact.
But Nikhil, can I ask you, what is the Bluetooth fundamental difference between this app and let's say the app that South Korea is using? What's the big difference?
Well, I know the difference between this and the Singapore app. Now, in the Singapore app, they're using a dynamic ID, which means that the ID for an individual keeps changing. And when data is shared between two folks, it cannot be linked back to the original individual. That's one thing. But also there is one of the problems with the privacy policy even here is that there is no clear demarcation of which is the authority that is responsible for this data. Whereas in case of that, there is a responsibility. There's an authority defined. So, for example, in India, let's say, even in case of Aadhaar, there's a UIDEI, which is the authority responsible for the data that is collected. In this case, there is no accountability. In fact, the privacy policy says that the government cannot be held accountable for any inaccuracy of data.
Let me ask
but also
Lalitesh about that.
Data
That's an
leakage or
important point.
Data gets stored. Who do you take to court?
Yeah, so Lalitesh, if you could answer that on the concerns that those who are skeptical have raised about the loopholes and who is accountable for this, for any misuse of data.
Which authority in the government is accountable?
Yeah, so this app is being run and hosted by the NIC, which is part of the MIT department. Legally, what exactly that means, I think I will leave it to the lawyers. I'm not a lawyer and I'm an engineer. But currently this app is, the app and its data is under complete control of the NIC.
All right. Well, I'm out of time. I think these are questions that we need to look at in a little more detail in the days ahead as we all download this app starting tomorrow. Lots of questions I still have, but thank you very much to all of you for joining us this evening.